Scary telling. I sat down at the table with my wife, feeling a bit uneasy about what was to come. She had suggested that we make a list of things we disliked about each other as a sort of therapeutic exercise to work on our issues. I wasn't sure how effective it would be, but I was willing to give it a try. My wife pulled out a piece of paper and a pen, looking quite prepared for this exercise. She unfurled the paper and looked back at me. "Now, look. This might be a bit much to start with, but it will help in the long run," she said, shifting her position and looking directly into my eyes. "Think of this as starting again. We iron out all of our problems with each other and work together to fix them." I raised an eyebrow skeptically, but nodded my head in agreement. She was right, we did have some issues to work through, and maybe this exercise would help us address them. She looked down at the paper and began writing. 10 things I hate about you," she said, her voice surprisingly cold. I winced at the use of the word hate, but tried to keep an open mind. "I hate how you never have the time to be with me anymore," she began, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. I had been working long hours at the office lately, and hadn't been spending as much time with her as I should have. She continued with her list, bringing up things like my messy habits and my lack of romance. Some of her complaints felt petty, but others hit close to home. And then, she said something that made my blood run cold. "I hate that you have been embezzling thousands of dollars from your company every month." My heart raced as I tried to hide my shock. How could she know about that? I had been careful to cover my tracks, or so I thought. But she wasn't finished yet. "I hate the fact that you think you can sleep with Katie behind my back," she said, her voice rising in anger. My mind raced as I tried to come up with a response, but I was too stunned to speak. How could she possibly know about that? I thought I had been so careful to hide my affair. Before I could say anything, she pulled out a gun and aimed it at me. "I hate the fact that I've decided to kill you painlessly," she said, her voice eerily calm. I felt a wave of fear wash over me as I realized that my wife had been harboring some very dark thoughts. This exercise had taken a very dangerous turn, and I wasn't sure if I would make it out alive. My wife's eyes had turned completely black, and her face had twisted into a grotesque, demonic grin. I stumbled backwards in fear, knocking over my chair. "What's wrong with you?" I cried out, my heart racing. She didn't answer, but instead began to convulse violently, her body contorting in unnatural ways. I tried to approach her to help, but she let out an ear-piercing scream that made me freeze in terror. As she screamed, I noticed that her eyes seemed to be getting even darker, if that was even possible. Her entire body was shaking violently, like she was possessed by something evil. I backed away slowly, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was this some kind of prank? Was she having a psychotic break? Or was something truly sinister at work? And then, she stopped moving and fell to the ground, seemingly lifeless. I hesitantly approached her, hoping that she was okay, but as I got closer, I realized that her face had twisted into a grotesque, demonic grin. I stumbled backwards in horror, tripping over the chair and falling to the ground. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I loved, had been replaced by some kind of demonic creature. As I tried to gather my thoughts, I heard a deep, menacing voice whispering in my ear. "You should have been more careful with your words," the voice said. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, except for me and the twisted, demonic version of my wife. I scrambled to my feet, desperate to escape. But as I tried to run towards the door, my wife's demonic form leapt towards me, her claws slashing through the air. I ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding her attacks. I could feel the wind from her claws as they sliced through the air, barely missing me. And then, She stopped attacking and just stood there, watching me with her black, soulless eyes. I stood there, frozen in fear, not sure what to do next. I had to find a way to escape, but I didn't know how. My mind raced as I tried to think of a way out, but everything seemed hopeless. I realized then that I was dealing with something far beyond my comprehension. This wasn't just a psychological issue or a marital problem, this was something supernatural. Something demonic. And I was completely out of my depth. My wife's demonic form just stood there, watching me with her black, soulless eyes. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what to do. As I tried to back away slowly, my wife suddenly began convulsing again. Her body twisted and contorted in unnatural ways, and I could hear bones cracking and popping. I watched in horror as her face seemed to stretch and distort, becoming more and more grotesque with each passing moment. Her skin became pallid and her hair turned jet black. And then, she let out a deep, guttural growl like an animal. I could feel the ground shaking beneath me as she charged towards me, her eyes filled with pure hatred. I tried to run, but she was too fast. She tackled me to the ground, her claws slashing at my face and chest. I tried to fight back, but she was too strong. I felt a searing pain in my chest as her claws ripped into my flesh. I screamed in agony, trying desperately to push her off me. But she was like a wild animal, impossible to control. As I lay there, bleeding and helpless, I heard her voice in my head. "I hate you," she growled. "I hate everything about you. You deserve to suffer." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. This was all so unfair. I had been trying to fix our relationship, to make things better between us. And now I was being attacked by some kind of demonic creature. But then, as I looked into her black, soulless eyes, I realized that this wasn't my wife anymore. She had been taken over by something else, something evil and twisted. And that meant I was in grave danger. I had to find a way to fight back, to protect myself from this demonic entity. With a burst of adrenaline, I managed to push her off me and scrambled to my feet. I backed away slowly, watching her warily as she snarled and spat at me. I knew I had to find a way out of this. But as I looked around the room, I realized that there was no escape. The windows were boarded up, and the door was locked. I was trapped, alone with a demon, and there was no telling what it would do next. I was trapped in the room with my wife's demonic form, and I knew I had to find a way to escape. But the windows were boarded up and the door was locked, leaving me with no way out. I could feel the creature's eyes on me, watching my every move. Its growls had turned into a sinister laughter, sending chills down my spine. And then, I heard a whisper in my ear. "You can't escape," the voice said, deep and menacing. "You belong to me now." I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, except for me and the demon. I realized then that I was dealing with something far beyond my comprehension. This wasn't just a psychological issue or a marital problem, this was something supernatural. Something demonic. I knew I had to find a way to fight back, to protect myself from this entity. But I had no idea how to do it. As I looked around the room, searching for a weapon or some way out, I noticed a strange symbol etched onto the wall. It looked like a pentagram, surrounded by other strange symbols. I didn't know much about demonology or the occult, but I had a feeling that this symbol held some kind of power. Maybe it could help me fight back against the demon. I approached the symbol cautiously, trying to make sense of it. As I studied it, I felt a strange energy coursing through my body, like an electric shock. And then, the demon spoke again, its voice echoing through the room. "You think you can defeat me?" it said. "You're nothing. You're weak." But I refused to give up. I focused all my energy on the symbol, trying to tap into its power. And then, something strange happened. The symbol began to glow, casting a bright light throughout the room. The demon shrieked in agony, its form twisting and contorting in the light. I could see its skin blistering and burning, as if it couldn't handle the power of the symbol. I pressed on, channeling all my energy into the symbol. And then, with a final burst of light, the demon vanished, leaving me alone in the room. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted and trembling. I couldn't believe what had just happened. But I knew that this wasn't over. There were still so many questions, so many mysteries to uncover. I had to find out what had happened to my wife, and what kind of entity had taken over her body. And most of all, I had to make sure that I was never in this kind of danger again. Because if I wasn't careful, the demon might return. And next time, it might not be so easy to defeat. After defeating the demonic entity that had taken over my wife's body, I knew that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to find out what had happened and why. I started by doing some research on demonology and the occult, trying to understand what I had seen in that room. I read about possession and exorcisms, and about how demons could take over human bodies. As I delved deeper, I realized that this wasn't just a random occurrence. There was something more at play here, something sinister and dark. I started looking into my wife's past, trying to find any clues that might explain what had happened. I discovered that she had been involved in some kind of occult group in college and had dabbled in witchcraft and other dark practices. I couldn't believe it. My wife, who I had always thought of as a loving and caring person, had a dark side that I had never even imagined. But the more I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just about her. There was a whole network of people involved in this dark world, people who were using their powers for evil purposes. And that's when I realized that I was in danger. These people knew about me, and they knew that I was onto them. They wouldn't hesitate to come after me, to silence me, to make sure that I never uncovered the truth. I knew that I had to be careful, to watch my back and stay alert. But I also knew that I couldn't give up. I had to keep digging, to uncover the truth and bring these people to justice. As I continued my investigation, I stumbled upon a name that kept coming up in my research. It was a woman named Lilith, who was rumored to be the leader of the occult group that my wife had been involved with. I knew that I had to find her, to confront her and get the answers I was looking for. But I also knew that it would be dangerous, that I was putting myself in harm's way. But I didn't care. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what the cost. And if that meant putting myself in danger, then so be it. I set out to find Lilith, using all the resources at my disposal. I tracked her to a remote location in the woods, where she was rumored to be holding a ritual. I approached cautiously, trying to stay hidden. And then, as I watched from the shadows, I saw her, a dark, sinister figure, surrounded by other members of the occult group. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I approached, my mind racing with fear and excitement. This was it, the moment of truth. And as I confronted Lilith, demanding answers, I realized that the truth was far darker than I had ever imagined. These people weren't just dabbling in witchcraft and the occult, they were using their powers for evil, for their own twisted purposes. I knew then that I had to stop them, no matter what it took. And as I raised my weapon, ready to do battle with these dark forces, I knew that the fight had only just begun.